Hi, Psyc100 students, we're back. Took a few days off to relax a little bit, try to catch up on grading all your assignments and so forth. And we're back with chapter 11, Personality. Oh man, what a chapter. Now, I don't know how you folks felt about this chapter, but this kind of describes who we are. I mean, think about it. What is our personality? We have a certain sense of what our personality is. And of course, we can ask our friends to describe us. Let's say pick 5 words to describe you. And it'd be interesting to see what they have to say, as well as our sibling, other family members, associates, how they describe our personality. And does it really match the way we think we are? So I'm very fascinated by this chapter. Artists' renditions of this chapter include renditions of Freud's 3-part personality theory, it going super fast, superego going super slow, ego kind of going the speed limit. Although these days there's not much traffic, and when there was a lot of traffic, very few people went the speed limit. You recognize some of these personality types, right? The know-it-all, the backstabber, the ostrich, and so on and so forth. We try to categorize personalities to describe who we are, but that's easier said than done. This artist is assuming you know who Carl Jung is and who Sigmund Freud is. And of course, if you have no knowledge of these gentlemen, you won't know why they are throwing busts of the theorists at each other. And here we have Siggy, a cartoon character who just wants to get through life without really being noticed. And that's very typical of the character of Siggy. And of course, you notice the art rendition of the stereotypic Freudian looking therapist, as well as laying down on the fainting couch, which I don't know any therapist that does therapy that way. And here's another art rendition of the Freud 3-part personality theory. You've got the id on one side, and he's introducing himself to the ego and so forth. Again, these artists are just all assuming that their audience knows chapter 11. So here's personality. Personality. Now you notice with this definition, I've underlined relatively stable. The reason I've underlined that because some new research is saying that personality, these characteristics that sort of describe who we are, actually might change more than we thought that they would change, right? And think about it, when you were young, what kind of personality did you have? Now, this of course takes us back to our chapter on memory. How accurate is our memory of when we were young? If we go based on other people, they have all different opinions as to what the way we were like. But how were we, and are we still the same way? For example, how many of you out there were shy growing up? And are you still shy now? Well, it's all a matter of perspective. Our attempts to understand personality range from a variety of different techniques, including phrenology, which we discussed. We talked about the brain, right? Mapping out different personality characteristics. We see that personality can vary depending on where you grow up throughout the country. And of course, we always, in Michigan, growing up in Detroit, I always assumed that people in California were crazy because I used to hear all kinds of crazy fashions and trends coming out of California. And now I'm a Californian, so maybe I was right? So the case study today is I'm going to compare and contrast 2 different methods of assessing personality with 2 different types of tests. And the first one is called a projective test. Now, if you remember the defense mechanisms, the notion of projection, and I always think of an overhead projector, this idea of showing ambiguous stimuli in order to project one's thoughts or feelings onto this particular drawing, right? Or this image. Or perhaps you're going to be making the drawing. So that's what I want you to do with the first projective test. I want you to, and in just a minute, pause this video and draw 3 different drawings on the same piece of paper. Now, they must be separate, but they can all be in the same piece of paper. I want you to draw me a house, a tree, and a person. Now, when you do the person, I want you to not draw a stick person. Did I hear you just say "aw" or groan a little bit? Now, the reason I don't want you to draw a stick person primarily is because there's no detail in that. So draw a person, a house, a tree, and a person. When you're done with all 3 drawings, draw a second person, the opposite gender of the first person that you drew. Okay, so go ahead and hit pause on this, draw those 4 drawings, and then come right back. I'll wait for you. I'm not going anywhere. Okay, are you back with your 4 drawings? A house, a tree, person 1, person 2. All right, so what is this projective test all about? Well, what we're hoping to do is we're hoping that the person drawing the assessment, when we're doing this assessment, is going to reveal some things about how they're thinking and feeling. Now, that could vary from person to person. Let me show you some sample drawings. For example, this is a drawing a student gave me and gave me permission to use. And you notice something unusual about this, that there's no facial expression. The animal on one side clearly has, this side, clearly has a facial expression, but the people don't. So what might that be indicative of? They ran out of time. They are really bad at making faces. Or maybe it might mean that they're hiding their emotions. Here's a complete drawing of the house tree person. You see person 1, person 2. There's a tree that's pretty fruit bearing. There's a typical house. Not a lot of issues with this particular drawing. You might say the guy had a pumpkin head, but besides that, drawing ability really doesn't play a role in projective tests. What we're looking for are not only elements of how the person draws things, but what they have to say about their drawing. I've had people draw things and they denied being depressed. Everybody else felt they were depressed, but they denied feeling depressed. And yet, a lot of their drawings were indicative of depression, and the things they had to say about them were indicative of depression. Here's another drawing, rather nice drawing, I might say. Most drawings look pretty nice to me compared to the way I draw. So let me show you a couple drawings that I've seen in the past, and I've reproduced them. Here's a drawing that I've had somebody do where they talked about a person that felt trapped in their home, felt things were happening in that house and nobody could come and save them. Contrast with this home, where this house clearly has a lot of open windows, open door, a lot of people coming and going. Here's one of those trees that we saw earlier, very healthy looking tree. Although I've seen this tree too. How do you think the person's feeling about this tree? Probably not that great. Sometimes I'll see this tree around the holidays, which doesn't mean a whole lot unless the person says there'll be no presents this year. Now, let's look at the 2 drawings. Typically, people draw their own gender first, and they draw the opposite gender second. So here's a person who drew a male gender first, right here, and then they drew the female gender second. You can see there's a huge contrast. If a little boy drew this, and by the way, this assessment, which is called house tree person, can be given to kids, teenagers, adults. If a little boy drew this, you can imagine his relationship with mom probably isn't that great. If a married man drew this, I'll say no more. You should never ever take a drawing and say, aha, I figured out exactly how you are. I know your personality. It's set in stone. It's just a drawing. It's just part of the package of the assessment process. Of course, you're going to do other assessments, and you're going to listen carefully in the interview to what the person says, what the person doesn't say, and what your observations. And of course, you're taking in all kinds of additional information. Now let's contrast that with our objective test. And I've chosen to talk about an objective test that was shared with me by a colleague at Golden West College, and it's called the Personality Spectrum. And what it asks the person to do is to reach each item and rank each one that is the least like them versus the most like them. And so you're never repeating a particular item. You answer all 8 questions of the personality spectrum. In class, I would be giving this to you so you can figure out what your classification is. We don't have that luxury here. And then you add up all the A's together, all the B's, the C's, and the D's, and then you map out your personality type. I wonder what you are. Are you more likely to be scoring as a giver, a thinker, an organizer, or an adventurer? Now you can see from this particular assessment, this person is clearly a giver. Well, I shouldn't say clearly because they're followed kind of closely by the organizer, right? And this happens to be an assessment that I happen to take. So the difference between projective tests and objective tests is this notion with projective, we're projecting our thoughts and feelings onto whether it's an image that's shown to us or whether in the case of House Tree Person, it's a drawing. With a objective personality test, like the personality spectrum, it's usually an objective test when we're filling out a number of questions. It's a pencil paper. It's a self-report inventory. So the personality spectrum is only as good as honest as we are with the information that we're sharing. If we want to deceive people by not answering correctly, we can clearly change the numbers, just like we can clearly change our drawings if we choose to do so, just to make ourselves look a little bit more ill than what we are, right? So I hope you have a good sense of the difference between projective versus self-report inventories, right? And there are a variety of other ones. For example, some other projective tests include the Rorschach inkblot test. It includes a Myers-Briggs, which some of you have filled out if you've taken a counseling class. Some of the other objective tests include things like the Myers-Briggs falls into objective. Another projective test would be the thematic apperception test. So for objective, we have the Myers-Briggs, we have the Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Inventory. Now, you can go to a variety of websites to get your personality read, but I always say trust those with a shipload of salt, because sure, you can go to these mystical readers that you'll find in San Francisco at the Mechanical Museum, or you can go to the Santa Monica Pier once it opens again, and for 25 cents, merely put your hand there and it'll read your future career. I personally went to a machine that they had at the Strawberry Festival, and for merely $1, it read out my personality. And the information was, well, I'll read some of it. It says, it is your nature to fight defeat. Okay, how did this machine know that I was Spider-Man, right? Well, take it with a shipload of salt. I think you get what you pay for, so to speak. I hope you have a little bit better understanding of psychological testing, measuring your personality, projective versus objective, House Tree Person versus personality spectrum. We're going to talk about Freud's theory of what makes us up as an individual, and it may be impacting us during the time we're not in the classroom. We'll continue with that next time. Thank you.